This is Cogitations with Carl Hartman, minister at Main Street Church of Christ in Lockney.
Well, good Sunday morning. I'm glad you're tuned in and joining us again on Cogitations here on 106.1, the Flip FM. Hopefully you were tuned in last Sunday. We began a new journey and answering the question about our origin, about our existence. And truly, how can we know for any certainty that there is a divine God above? And as I mentioned then, why this is really important, even for those of us that are strong in our faith and our resolve and our certainty, is there are many out there that still don't have a firm belief in the divine being. And if they don't believe in God, they're not going to believe the Bible. So the Bible becomes a difficult resource to utilize in order to try to persuade them. Because if they don't believe in God, then they don't believe in the source of the inspiration of the Bible. Therefore, they don't believe the Bible is inspired. Now, God himself tells us in his word that you can actually prove his existence without the Bible. And you think about how long mankind went without the scriptures readily available, readily at hand for them to look at. And we find this in several places, but I'm going to look at Romans chapter 1. And I'm going to pick up in verse 18 of Romans chapter 1. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who suppress the truth in unrighteousness, because what may be known of God, note what he says here, what may be known of God is manifest in them, for God has shown it to them. Okay, Paul, how has God shown it to them? Verse 20, for since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so they are without excuse. There is no excuse in the universe to not ultimately observe the creation and not come to the conclusion that there has to be a creator. His invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made. Paul penned there. So the Bible itself, for those of us that understand its inspiration, claims that we can simply look at creation and come to the conclusion that there is a divine mind that is responsible for its formation. Now let's take another look real quick over in the Psalms. And there's a psalm that really relates how creation speaks. Psalms 19, beginning in verse 1 there of the 19th Psalm. The heavens declare the glory of God. Here they're not talking about the abode of God, but the skies and space. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament, the solid earth, the planets, the firmament shows his handiwork. Day unto day they utter speech, and night unto night reveal knowledge. There is no speech nor language where their voice is not heard. You see, creation speaks every language because it's simply looking and observing creation, looking in the sky and wondering how those clouds are formed and how they produce the rain, and looking beyond them at night into the starry sky and wondering what those glittering spots are, or that gray mass moving across the sky, or in the morning when that orange orb arises over the horizon and we witness the dawn, the birds as they migrate, the oceans as they swell. All of these things bring questions. How did this come to be? How did our planet, our universe, achieve such perfect balance? fundamental law, that's where we left off last Sunday, the fundamental law that all science is hinged on, all science is built on. It is one that we hear all the time. We've probably spouted it out of our own mouths several times. The law of cause and effect. Every observable effect in the universe has to have preceding it an adequate cause. That is the law of cause and effect. Every observable effect in the universe has to have preceding it an adequate cause. An example of this that I heard once is you're driving down the interstate and this moving van goes past you and it's speeding and it's weaving all over the road. And as it's weaving all over the road, suddenly it just comes to a crashing halt as the front end of the truck is collapsed in and flipped over and spins around and comes to a stop. And of course, you being a concerned individual for another pullover, and you get out of the vehicle and you rush over there to see if this individual's okay, and you're helping them out of the cab of that vehicle. And they're like, "Oh man, did you see that? Did you see that?" And you're like, "What? Man, I tried my best. I was weaving everywhere, trying to dodge him, but finally one of those mosquitoes caught the front end of my truck and wrecked me." Well, we've all driven down the road. We've all had bugs impact our windshield and our front end of our car, and we know that a mosquito impacting a vehicle is not an adequate cause to create the effect of that wreck. That's the law of cause and effect. There has to be an adequate cause to produce a particular effect. The law of cause and effect states that every material effect must have an adequate anticipant or simultaneous cause. The mass of a rock you pick up off the ground is not going to provide sufficient gravitational pull to cause a tidal wave. There must be an adequate cause for the tidal wave, like a massive offshore underwater earthquake. I got that from Tsunamis in 2000, an article that was produced, a book on page 1064, all about tsunamis. And so they're talking about that law of cause and effect and how it affects the ocean. And so just throwing a rock in the ocean is not going to cause a tidal wave. It's not adequate to produce that effect. The law of cause and effect tells us leaning against a mountain will certainly not cause it to topple over. Jumping up and down on the ground will not cause an earthquake. If a chair is not placed in an empty room, one will not spontaneously appear in that room. If matter was not made and placed in the universe, we would not exist. There must be an adequate cause, a preceding or simultaneous cause for every material effect in the universe. And that's the law of cause and effect. So fundamentally, that's what science does. It makes an observation. It sees something. It sees the effect, and it asks, what caused it? And there has to be an adequate. The law of cause and effect has a long history of reasoning. The law of cause and effect is also referred to as the law or principle of causality. It has been investigated and recognized for millennia. In Phaedo, written by Plato in 360 BC, he speaks concerning causality, wherein he elaborates on the causes of everything, while each thing comes into being and why it perishes and why it exists. And that's in a book called Plato, 1966, chapter 1, verse 96, A and B, or stanza 9 and 6. It's sort of a play, but he has this rhetoric on causality that's there. Moving forward 2 millennia, in no way changed the established fact pressed by the law of cause and effect. In 1781, the renowned philosopher Immanuel Kant wrote concerning the principle of causality in his Critique of Pure Reason, that everything that happens presupposes a previous condition, which it follows with absolute certainty, in conformity with a rule. All changes take place according to the law of the connection of cause and effect. And Kant, in 1781, made that statement. Fast forward another 153 years. Our understanding of the world still did not cause the law to be discredited. In 1934, W.T. Stace, professor of philosophy at Princeton University, in a critical history of Greek philosophy, wrote, "Every student of logic knows that this is the ultimate canon of the sciences, the foundation of them all. If we did not believe the truth of causation, namely everything which has a beginning has a cause, and that in the same circumstance the same things invariably happen, all the sciences would at once crumble to dust. In every scientific investigation, this truth is assumed." So that's in his writings, 1934, on page 6. Still today, no one disputes the fact asserted in this foundational law. It is interwoven. It is the foundation of every scientific exploration. So, cause and effect. That's what we look at when we are examining our world. So I want to look at some facts. What's going to structure us moving forward is the examination of 3 facts. Undisputable, cannot be argued against facts. The first fact that I want to look at is the fact that the universe exists. You'll be hard-pressed to find a person that would argue with you that the universe does not exist. I say this jokingly, but if you find such a person, just strike them with a chair and ask them if they felt it. The universe exists. It is an undisputed fact. We live in it, we operate in it, we observe it every second of our existence within it. There are very few individuals in the world who would argue this fact, for to do so is to argue their own existence. To say the universe does not exist is to say that the individual claiming it does not exist. So if they don't exist, they're not there to make that claim. The universe exists. That is a fundamental fact. So let's apply this law of cause and effect, of causality, to this fact that the universe exists. So if the universe exists, then that leaves us with a question. Well, really, a choice. There's 2 choices. Since the fact that the universe exists, that leaves us with 2 choices. Either something came from nothing, or something has always existed. So the fact that the universe exists leaves you with those 2 options only. Either the universe just spontaneously sprung from nothing, or something has always been there. Because remember, in the law of cause and effect, there had to be something preceding it or something simultaneously with the effect that causes it. So let's examine this side of it came from nothing. All of scientific knowledge is built on the premise that something cannot come from nothing. Therefore, something has always existed. Thus, the reason we search for origin, just the reason we see an effect and we search for the cause. Right there next to the law of cause and effect is this fundamental understanding within science that something cannot come from nothing. There has to be a generating cause for the observed effect. And so it's not simply spontaneously coming to be. So that leaves us with the other option. Something has always existed. And that leaves us with three choices. There's three choices that have been put forth to answer that something that has always been there. Those three choices, and we're going to examine each one, is matter, energy, or question mark. That's how I have it right now. Because the entire observed universe is matter and energy. The entire observed universe. Matter and energy. And if matter and energy are not the cause, then we have to look to something else that has always been to be the cause. And so the ultimate question is matter and energy an eternal substance that could have been there before or at the moment of creation? So let's examine these things a little bit. Science formally taught, and those of us that are older might go back and think in our science classes what was formally taught. Science is constantly evolving in their understanding and in their statements. And sometimes, especially when something that they have pushed forward and have based so many theories on ends up crumbling with new evidence, it silently goes away. They just simply stop bringing it up or talking about it, and they don't just come out and say, this isn't to be. There's a book called Modern Science and the Christian Faith, and it's written by scientists. On page 11 and page 21, I cobbled together this information. Science formally taught the conservation of matter, that matter was indestructible, that we could change its state, but we could neither add to nor subtract from the total amount of matter. Today, science teaches that matter can be changed into radiant energy, such as light or heat, and cease to exist as matter. That is, in fact, how we get energy. We get energy through the destruction of matter. And once that energy is spent, it's gone. It's gone. I think of it like this. You throw a log on the fire. You start a fire with that hunk of wood, and that hunk of wood generates heat. The flames you see is just a product of the chemical reaction of the burning of the log, and that just produces heat. And that heat radiates out so far and is dissipated and is gone. Can you take a jar and capture some of that heat, and you can get a special jar, special sealed jar, a super thermos, and you just gather that heat as it comes off the fire and seal it and take it to the lab and take that heat and convert it back to a log? You can't do that. It's a one-way street. Matter is consumed in the production of energy, and we're going to look at that a little bit more down the road. And then once that energy is spent, it's gone. It's gone. You see where this really started to come into play in this day and age of atomic bombs and atomic energy, and when we began to literally split an atom, it is not necessary to pile up evidence that matter can be changed into energy and gone. These all indicate a beginning or a creation of the universe. Every star is losing energy and mass. They're currently trying to measure and have their own devices in measuring the consumption of the sun and estimating how long until it's consumed. Because it's a one-way street. That mass, that matter, that fuel is being burnt up and converted to energy. Every star is losing energy and mass and will ultimately blink out of existence. Therefore, what will end had to have a beginning. That's a fundamental, understood concept. If something has an end, it had to have a beginning. We see that in the course of all of our lives. All of us ultimately come to the grave. The material body, the flesh that we are comprised of, the body, even in Scripture, we're told in Ecclesiastes, returns to the dust from which it came. It had a beginning in the womb. It has an end in the grave. Now that something cannot be matter. The something that has always existed, that created the universe, that something cannot be matter, since matter can be completely destroyed and thus it is not eternal. Now, those of us that are older, when we sat in our science classes and opened our science books, they had a whole definition of the Big Bang Theory that started with a ball of matter, about the size of a soccer ball, and there was enough matter in that, and they would even say, I have a wonderful article from Popular Science where they went to this particle accelerator where these guys were trying to recreate the Big Bang. How stupid is that? If you honestly believe the entire universe was created by this Big Bang process and you're trying to reinvent the Big Bang, if you succeed, what's going to happen? We're all dead. You just created an explosion that's capable of creating an entire universe. Well, it ain't going to create one on top of ours. But they taught this ball of matter. Then it was equal parts of matter and antimatter, and we know that, as soon as that universe exists, well, actually, I'm bleeding over to the new theory, so let me go back. So we had this, and this thing explodes, and there's enough soccer ball size matter to create an entire universe, which is absurd also. They don't teach that anymore. You pick up your grandkid's science book, you turn to the Big Bang Theory, and it says something like this. 4.6 billion years ago, our universe was a much simpler place. It was a point of energy no larger than the period at the end of this sentence. It'll say that, or something similar to that. They don't say in the Big Bang Theory anymore, matter. It's one of those silent disappearings because they have come to understand that matter is not eternal, so we can no longer put matter forth as the answer to the creation of the universe. So we got to do something else. So we're going to go to energy, a point of energy. And we're going to look at the problem with that, and hopefully we don't run out of time on the show today and leave you hanging till next week. So it is due to the revelation of this indisputable scientific fact that the proponents of the Big Bang Theory quietly changed their theory from starting the universe with a ball of supercompressed matter to now stating it's an extremely small point of energy. Could they be wrong again? I mean, they were wrong before. They had to change their theory. And note, it's the Big Bang Theory. Remember our definitions on the previous program about theories. Okay, it's not a law. It's not a fact. Okay, it can't be proven. And really, to prove it, you'd had to have been there in the beginning. So let's look at this. The universe is made up of matter and energy. Both of those exist here. Matter, look at the definition of matter. This is all science. Matter is anything that has mass and takes up space. Remember that. Matter is anything that has mass and takes up space. So if something has mass, it is matter. That is pretty straightforward and easy to grasp, but energy is a bit more abstract. Energy is the ability to do work. That's the basic middle school science book. Energy is the ability to do work, or the ability to move or elicit change in matter. So you have to have matter to produce energy. Cause and effect. Any release of energy has as its cause some manipulation of matter. In effect, the amount of energy something has reference to its capacity to cause things to happen. You can read about this on www.lifescience.com/4288-what-is-energy. Okay? I mean, this is coming from scientists. So matter is anything that has mass, takes up space. Energy is the ability of that matter to do work. So you can't have a point of energy without having matter before it, but we already know that matter is not eternal, so matter could not be the causality of the universe. So it's a circular argument, a loop that they have put themselves in, because energy does not exist without matter. Let's look a little further. We got a few minutes left. I think we can do it. In the early 20th century, scientists theorized that mass and energy are intimately linked. Now, remember, what's mass? Matter is anything that has mass and takes up space. Well, when you talk about mass, you have to say matter, because if it has mass, it's matter. Albert Einstein described this so-called mass-energy equivalency with his famous equation. Everybody knows it. E equals mc squared. So the c there, the c squared, is the speed of light, which, by the way, is not a constant. Depends on the medium the light is passing through. But E equals mc squared. C is the speed of light. E is the energy produced. So the energy produced is dependent on mass and the speed of light, squared. M denotes mass. Now, what did we just discover? Anything that has mass and takes up space is the definition of matter. Therefore, matter has to precede energy. Which came first, matter or energy? Energy or matter? Let us think about this very carefully and logically. Anything with mass is defined as what? Matter. So, therefore, what do we have here? You have a situation in which you have this equation. Anything with mass is matter. The M and E equals mc squared. The equation for calculating energy is mass. So you had to have matter pre-existing to make energy. So thus the whole new Big Bang theory needs to go in the garbage can, because it can't be a point of energy for the exact same reason they had to change it from matter to energy. You had to have matter to produce that energy. So if you must have mass to produce energy, and anything with mass is matter, and matter is not eternal, then logic dictates that energy is not eternal, nor could energy had existed before matter, since matter is required for the existence of energy. And since they are completely codependent, then they would have both come into existence simultaneously and will both cease to exist simultaneously. Therefore, a different cause had to be there to create the effect of matter that ultimately produces energy. Hopefully that makes sense. It's very fundamental and very simple. You can't have energy without matter. Matter is not eternal, nor is energy. Something else has to be the answer. Next Sunday, we're going to explore some more and begin to move towards the answer of what's that something else that it could possibly be? What is that probability that can't be refuted? Hope you join us next Sunday, 9 a.m. on Cogitations here on 106.1 The Flip FM. Until then, I hope you are guarded and blessed.
Tune in next Sunday at 9 for another edition of Cogitations with Carl Hartman, minister at Main Street Church of Christ in Lockney.